Hey guys, Aaron Miles here with On Tilt Gaming. Going to be bringing you a new series about Wanderer format. And I feel like there are a lot of newer players that we've gotten in the last few months, which means that they haven't gotten to play when Grim Cluster was legal in New Frontiers. So they really have like four sets of cards that they suddenly have access to if they're playing Wanderer that they have no idea what they do, and it can be a lot to catch up on. So I'm trying to put this out here kind of as a resource for those players as like, here's what the meta looks like, here's what the Forbidden list looks like, here's how you counter the meta, these are the staples. And it's possible that newer players like have an idea for a combo deck only to find out that that combo already exists but a little bit more refined. I kind of want to put those things out there for people. So this first video I'm going to focus on the Forbidden list. There are 6 cards on the Forbidden list: Ruler's Memoria, Levitine the Demon Sword, Seer of the Blue Moon, and her flip side Kaguya Princess of the Moon, Reflect Child of Potential, the flip side Refrain Child of Convergence, Whisper from the Abyss, and Tell a Fairy Tale. Now, the cards on the left, Ruler's Memoria, Levitine, and Reflect, are cards that are banned for their general power level within the format. The cards on the right, Seer the Blue Moon, Whisper from the Abyss, and Tell a Fairy Tale, are banned because they are key cards in a degenerate combo deck. They're not all in the same deck. I actually have lists for those 3 decks so you can see what they look like, figure out why they were banned, try to make something similar that's still legal. So I want to go through each of these cards, and kind of explain what they do, because, the 3 on the left everybody's seen, they're all Alice Cluster, but the 3 on the right are all Grim Cluster. And it's kind of funny how that works out, where the Grim Cluster cards are all degenerate combo decks, Alice Cluster's just generic power level. It sounds about right. So first off, we're going to go with Ruler's Memoria. Why is Ruler's Memoria on the ban list? That's a good question. I don't know. Italy recently unbanned Ruler's Memoria from Wanderer, and then they had an event, and in that top 8, they saw 0 Ruler's Memoria, which makes sense to me. I think that Moonshade is overall a more powerful card. It's actually very hard to play Ruler's Memoria in Wanderer because Levitine is banned. It's very hard to get 8 Regalia into your deck, and you do want to be playing 8 Regalia if you're playing Ruler's Memoria. Sometimes you can run 7, but 7, 8. I'm going to talk with 8 as the baseline because that is what pretty much everybody who plays Ruler Memoria plays. So it's actually very hard to play 8 Regalia without Levitine because, 1, you don't have the most generic Regalia to put into your deck, and then it also kind of takes away Death Scythe. Death Scythe's not as relevant in a format where Levitine is not legal, because the only JO rulers with swiftness are, I believe, Sylvia, Lumia, and there might be 1 or 2 others. They all have around 1,000 attack. Nothing super duper threatening. So your choices are very suddenly extremely limited. You can play Apollo in most things, but it's not as generic as you'd want it to be. You could play Artemis the God's Bow, but for the most part, I'm not a huge fan of that card if you're not running Charlotte's Water Transformation Magic, and now you're kind of hedging yourself towards blue in order to play a 5-color stone, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So overall, I think Ruler's Memoria is actually pretty weak, and easily something that I could see being unbanned. Italy already did it, it made no impact. I think Moonshade overall is the stronger card, because it is a 5-color stone that doesn't have any main deck restrictions. Yeah, you have to pay a little bit of life, but it's overall not a huge deal over the course of a game. So why is Ruler's Memoria on here? It probably doesn't have to be. So if you were confused about that, no shame. Everybody is. Then we go on to Levitine the Demon Sword. This card, the short answer as to why this is banned is that it does 5 very relevant, very powerful things for 0 mana. Obviously in New Frontiers we're talking about, there's talk of banning this card, and if anything is banned in New Frontiers, it should obviously be banned in the Eternal format, where there are more things you can do with it. So it may look from the outside like Levitine's extremely powerful for its swiftness ability, for its ability to give your J-Ruler imperishable, but I think the one that is the most relevant, the most often, is the ability to sack your creatures for 0 mana at instant speed. It takes away an entire subset of cards from being relevant. Cards like Triton, Valentina, Princess of Love. Actually, I think that's the Puppet Monarch. Valentina Puppet Monarch is the one I'm thinking of. And Slayer of the Overlord Priscia. The shift side that takes control of Resonators. As well as, things that want to exile your opponent's creatures suddenly don't have as much effect when they have a Levitine. It's just a little bit too powerful to be able to do that on top of all the other things that it does. So pretty much all in all, Levitine's just like this catch-all for extremely powerful effects, and it definitely deserves a place on the list. I don't think anybody's really going to argue that one, especially if we're talking about banning it, in New Frontiers. That's a whole different argument, though. Whether or not I think it should be banned in New Frontiers is irrelevant. I do believe it should be banned in Wanderer. And then we go on to Reflect Child of Potential. I'm not going to go as in-depth into this card. If you go to your local store and you ask any player that's played in the last year, or was playing a year ago rather, why is Reflect banned? They'll tell you. I'm sure they'll have a lot of stories about how they lost to Reflect, about how they don't want to run Reflect, but all the good players would. It was really annoying. Should Reflect be banned in New Frontiers? It's a whole other question. I do believe it should be banned in Wanderer, at least. I think it is a little bit too powerful there with all of the older cards. So those are kind of the generic ones, very powerful general cards. You can throw them into any deck, and it just makes it a little bit better. So now we're going to go into the right side. We have Seer the Blue Moon, which I don't know if everybody knows what these cards does, so I'm going to kind of take it slow here. So you pay 0 mana, and that's your judgment cost. 0 mana, but you have to have played a treasury item this turn, kind of like Kaguya 4. And then you can pay 1 to set chance standbys instead of 2 mana. And then her flip side, you pay 0 to change the attribute on a treasury item to another one. For example, Rope of the Fire Rat says tap. It's an addition treasury item. It says tap, target fire resonator deals no damage this turn, and Kaguya's J Ruler side would allow you to change that to target water resonator or target wind resonator deals no damage this turn. Things like that. So you're thinking, oh, and then you can, pay 2 blue and 1 to add a treasury item from your deck to your hand. So a lot of people are like, oh, what treasury items are that good? Was this a preemptive ban for Kaguya 4? And the answer is no. The entire power level of this card is revolved around her ability to set chance standbys for 1. Now you might be thinking, oh, why is that so powerful? I will show you a deck in a minute here about, the kind of abusableness of that, as well as, from what I keep hearing, the company didn't want to have to revolve the power level of future stealth and chance standby cards around being able to be set for 1. So this was sort of a preemptive ban on their part in Wanderer, as well as something that was a little necessary based on what we already had. Then you go into Whisper from the Abyss. It is a 1 black and 1 spell chant instant that says pay any amount of life and then draw a card for each multiple of 500. So the most amount of life that you can pay is 3,900 because you cannot, well, you could pay 4,000, draw 8 cards and lose the game. But starting from the game, you can pay 39 and draw 7 cards, or you can pay 35 and draw 7 cards. And as I'm sure you can figure out real quick, drawing 7 cards is something that we should not be allowed to do on turn 2. And there's a deck for that I'll get into a little bit later. And then Tell a Fairy Tale, you search your deck for a Fairy Tale Resonator and then put it into your hand. If your ruler is Grim, then you put it into your field instead. 1 white and 2 colorless spell chant. There's a deck with that I'll get into in a second here. So rather than keep talking about these cards without showing you the deck, I'm just going to get into it, show you why they're banned. So the first one, Seer the Blue Moon. As you can tell by this deck, it is 36 Croco Sharks and 4 Pumpkin Witch. You pretty much mulligan anything that isn't a Pumpkin Witch, mulligan anything that is not a Pumpkin Witch, so all your Croco Sharks get mulligan because you'll draw more. And the main strategy of this deck is to set a Croco Shark on turn 1, set 2 Croco Sharks on turn 2, and then on turn 3 summon a Pumpkin Witch, flip in your 3 Croco Sharks, which will allow you to play 3 more Croco Sharks from your hand. I believe that either runs you out of cards in hand or leaves you with 1 or 2, depending on if you went first or second. And then you kill them because you have 6, I believe, 12, or 1,000. I don't remember if Croco Shark counts himself. He would kind of have to, right? But yeah, so you have 6 12 flyers with haste, and there's really not a whole lot you can do about that on turn 3. This is an extremely straightforward list. It's a 2-card combo in a 2-card deck, so that's why Seer's banned. You don't want things like this running around. Then we're going to get into Tell a Fairy Tale. Why is Tell a Fairy Tale banned? Well, it turns out Captain Hook is a fairy tale, and mana dorks exist. So you can actually just Captain Hook your opponent on turn 2. And with the amount of ramp that you have in the deck, it's not, impossible for you to Captain Hook again on like turn 4 by just discarding a Fairy Tale and adding a Captain Hook to your hand, because Grim does allow Captain Hook to be played for any color of mana. These are just stock lists. I mean, it's not. I'm just trying to show you why this card is banned. The rest of the list is irrelevant. It's really just like Elvish Priest, Captain Hook, Tell a Fairy Tale. It's really all that matters here. And then cards like Dreams of Juliet are legal that allow you to flicker your Captain Hook. And it's really, really hard to come back from a turn 2 Captain Hook, putting you on 0 stones. You can make the argument, oh, you can just run basic stones and not have to worry about that, but to limit yourself to a single color deck for an entire format just because, just so you can't get turn 2 Captain Hooked is not a healthy game state. And if they see that you have 2 monostones, they can just pull out a giant, Skyscraper Giant, because that is also a fairy tale. The deck's a little too versatile, a little too powerful. Telefairy Tale actually got banned before Captain Hook came out, but Captain Hook had been spoiled. And a lot of people were like, oh, I think we should just wait and see. We should not wait and see. This would have been a house. It's really not fair to limit people to one color decks in a format. And you can make the argument, oh, you can play 4 dual stones, but if you ever hit your 2 duels, as your first 2 stones, you just lose the game, which is extremely unfun to play against, extremely unfair. And that's why Telefairy Tale's banned in Wanderer. And then we go down to Whisper. So the main idea of this deck is you play Morgiana on turn 1, you play Whisper on turn 2, you pay yourself down to 100 life, you draw 7 cards, which means you look at 21 cards because of Morgiana, and you get as many Yigdor Beast of the World Tree as possible, which costs 10 mana less if you're at 100 life. You play them, you play Perseus Call to Action, and then suddenly on turn 2 you have 14 hundreds with haste, and they kill you. And you can't kill them. They pay themselves down to 100, but it doesn't matter because they're tree. So if you do kill them with like a thunder or a lightning strike, then they just get to summon Alice in the Regalia. Now you're in an even worse position. And overall, this deck was just a little bit too degenerate. I believe this was the best deck of the 3, as far as consistency goes, because aside from Morgiana, the Wolf, and the Pumpkin Witches and the tree cards, every card in this deck says draw a card. So you're going to get to your combo eventually. And, just once again, just a little bit too powerful. Turn 2 kills are not fun. We've established that. Turn 3 is too early to kill someone because of the Croco Shark Pumpkin Witch deck. That's when it pops off as turn 3. So we've banned that out, decided that turn 3 kills are too powerful. These other 2 are essentially, or this one's a turn 2 kill. Captain Hook is essentially a turn 2 kill. Turn 2 lock you out of the game kind of situation. So the power level of Wanderer that we've established is that turn 3 kills are not okay. Turn 4 kills probably fine. I know that Magic likes to revolve their old ban lists around what turn you can kill your opponent on. I'd like to think that Force Will is kind of going to follow suit, and so far we've determined that turn 3 kills are not okay. And then people have made this deck with the first Lie instead of Whisper from the Abyss. I gave it a shot when we were testing for Billy's, or HQ Games' 1K Wanderer event, because we were thinking that we were going to see this deck, and it's awful. It's really bad with the first Lie instead of Whispers. You only draw 3 cards instead of 7, and that's a huge difference. It's not enough. It's nowhere near enough. So, very good call on them to ban out Whisper from the Abyss. And now, the last section of this video, I'm going to talk about cards that could be put onto the ban list in the near future. I'm a little surprised that 1 or 2 of them haven't made it on so far. So we have Gwyber the White Dragon, Pumpkin Witch, and Split Heaven and Earth. So Gwyber the White Dragon, if you've been playing Force Will anytime since Alice Cluster came out, you know about the power level of Gwyber the White Dragon. Paying a 5 mana creature for 1 mana on turn 2, turn 3, throwing it down in multiples. Pumpkin Witch, each Resonator you control gains Flying and Swiftness. You saw it in 2 of those decks. If you look at the top 8 lists from current Wanderer events, you'll see Pumpkin Witch in a good number of them. And Split Heaven and Earth. Split Heaven and Earth has actually been absent from top 8 lists, but I'll get into that in a second here. So Gwyber's really the biggest enabler of Pumpkin Witch decks. For the most part, if you're running a Pumpkin Witch deck, you're going to be running Gwyber. It's just the easiest thing to throw down. You're going to be running Adam Brawleys because Incarnation works that way. So Gwyber just kind of a little bit too powerful, way too undercosted, way too overstated. Yeah, you have Susanoo again, but if I'm playing, if I play a Gwyber on turn 2, Susan doesn't come down until turn 3. That means I'm going to be untapped again. I could, have a counter spell or something. I've already hit you for 12. Your Susan could be less relevant. I could throw down a Robe of the Fire Rat. Susan's just not an effective enough answer. Gale Force is not an effective enough answer. It's just way too much for way too little. Gwyber's just kind of a house. He's the big, scary boogeyman of Force Will. And I could see him getting onto the ban list. I don't think he's a necessary ban, especially not an immediate one. This isn't like an emergency, but I do think Gwyber's a little bit too strong. Pumpkin Witch, you're going to see this in a lot of lists. He's kind of the great OTKer. He just does a little bit too much for a little bit too little, especially with the way that Incarnation works in this game. And Apollo, it's really easy to start a Brawly chain with her. I keep changing the genders of Pumpkin Witch. It's a girl, I'm pretty sure. Otherwise it would be Pumpkin Warlock. So, Pumpkin Witch is something I could easily see going on, mostly because of Adam Brawley, but I don't think Adam Brawley is something that you need to ban instead of Pumpkin Witch. I think that if you ban Brawley, Witch is going to find a way to sneak up in other Incarnation decks, with Cthulhu's, and it's easier to just ban out the Witch instead of, focusing on keeping her in the format because we don't want to say that she's too powerful, because banning Brawley doesn't really make sense when he's only good with Witch. and I think keeping Brawly around would be completely fine. And then Split Heaven and Earth. This card, this is the one you might not have seen before. It didn't appear in many top 8 lists. Grim card. It's a double red burn spell. This card deals 300 damage to each player for each special magic stone that he or she controls. And for the most part, this is run in a mono red deck. Sometimes they'll run 4 dual stones. I remember back in Bahamut format, most people ran 2 dual stones. They'd run a little red and a Nihilist. Doesn't really hurt you that much, but when your opponent's on like 4 or 5 stones, they're taking 1500 damage for 2 mana. That's a little bit too much. And the argument has always been that Split is the great equalizer. It punishes greedy mana bases. I don't think that having a 2-color deck that runs 10 duels is something that I should be punished for by a 2-mana burn spell dealing 3000 damage to me. Just because I wanted to play a 2-color deck and I wanted to have consistent mana. The thing that drew me to Force of Will initially was how consistent the mana base was, how easy it was to play a 2 or 3 color deck. And then you have cards like Split Heaven and Earth that make it so that you can't do that. It's extremely unfun to play against. It's a little bit too powerful. I feel 300 damage is just way too much. You compare it to cards like Purifying Fire, it's 2 mana, deals 700 damage. Suddenly on 3 stones, Split Heaven and Earth outvalues that. And yeah, you know, you have to take it back and you have to eat a little bit of damage yourself, but for the most part, if you're running Split, you're building your deck around it, you're running a burn deck. It's not going to hurt you. Sure, it's not as splashable and everything, but that doesn't mean that it's not something that should be banned out. A card doesn't have to be powerful across the board in order to end up on the ban list. You know, as we see with cards like Telefairy Tale. And overall, I think it's just, you know, a little bit too much, as I said before. So, you know, those are the cards that I think I could see on the ban list sometime soon. We'll get another update onto the ban list as Echoes of the New World come out. Really excited for that. And, you know, I'll have another video for you guys soon, kind of going into the meta of Wanderer format, looking at top 8 deck lists from the events that we have had, all that good stuff. So, till then, I'm Aaron Miles.